Here's Zach Jackson with Your Turn.
A suspect in an alleged crash that killed a SUNY Potsdam student appeared in court last week. Jacob Kreis, who's 18, denied involvement when pulled over by police, according to court documents. Ricky says he made a young, idiotic choice. Anyone that says they didn't make questionable decisions as a kid is a liar. And Michelle says he needs to pay the consequences and set the example that if you choose to break the law, there's consequences. And Shirley adds, it's sad that 2 lives are going to be lost. My condolences and prayers for all involved. Federal agents seized illegal drugs, guns, and cash in Messina and Hogansburg during raids dubbed Operation Weed Out. Meanwhile, the St. Regis Mohawk tribe says the actions of U.S. officials have jeopardized their relationship. Martha says, thank you, law enforcement, job well done. And Andrea says they need to tackle and focus on the real problems in this county. And Judith adds, American government agencies need to respect the fact that reservations are sovereign territory, and it is very important to treat their leaders, elders, law enforcement with respect every time the territory is entered. And people around the North Country were treated last week to a stunning display of iridescent clouds, also known as rainbow clouds. Amy says, I was out at lunch and saw it, and a bunch of people were trying to convince others it was the Northern Lights. And Jacinda adds, I've never even seen this in the sky. How beautiful, and how awesome that people were able to get photos. As always, thanks for your comments. We'll have more of your thoughts on the news next week with Your Turn. Zach Jackson, 7 News.